Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new episode of the podcast. For a lot of entrepreneurs, selling their company is a dream that actually never happens. Either you never plan for it, it just never comes true, or sometimes you don't even know where to start. Well, the guests of today, Elias and Sebastian, are going to answer just this question. How do you get ready and where do you start in case you want to sell your company? So, if you're an entrepreneur and you're thinking of selling your company, you really want to listen to this episode. But also, if you're not, this episode is going to tell you how you can make sure that you have the right processes in place so that even if you don't sell your company, you make your company ready to grow faster and scale. Tune in because this is going to be a very exciting conversation. Welcome to Growth Architects, a podcast for tech entrepreneurs, product innovators, and marketing strategists. Whether you're searching for product market fit, exploring new growth channels, or trying to avoid common startup pitfall, this is where you'll find proven strategies to fuel your success. And now, let's get started. Hello, everyone, and welcome to a new podcast episode. I'm joined today by Elias and Sebastian from Best Bonobos. For most entrepreneurs, selling their company is just a dream that never happens. With Elias and Sebastian, we're going to discuss today how, as an entrepreneur, you can get ready for this step. Guys, I'm very happy to have you here.
Pleased to be here. Thanks for having us, Federico.
Well,
Yes.
thanks a lot for joining. For the
Absolutely.
ones who don't know you, would you like to introduce yourself and tell us more what you guys do?
Absolutely. Sebastian, would you like to start?
Yes. Well, thanks for having us. I'm Sebastian. I've been an entrepreneur for 12 years now. I started my first business 12 years ago, grew pretty quickly, a staffing company. In the meantime, I learned a lot about being an entrepreneur, but also getting investors on board, which is a partly sell of the business, of course. Recently, I decided to sell the company. That's why I got into this topic. I learned a lot from that. And that's why I asked Elias as well, how did you sell your company? And that's how we got to talk. And that's how the idea for Best Bonobos came up.
Cool. Very exciting. And what about you, Elias?
Well, I'm Elias, as said. I've been an entrepreneur for just over 15 years, and I have a background in mainly a background in marketing and sales, commercial management. Before starting my own company in 2011, I used to be with bigger companies, and I always tend to say to people that I've done it the other way around, because typically people start at a small company and then grow into a big company. I started at a huge company and ended up selling my own company with 15 people. I founded Marketing Guys, a MarTech agency, back in 2011, built that and sold that last year in 2024. A lot of experience in that process, where I think basically Sebastian and I started talking about this, about the experiences we had, and we encountered similar obstacles, so
Yes,
to say,
we
in
did,
the sale of our company. And as you said earlier in the intro, a lot of entrepreneurs dream about selling their company. A lot never sell. There is only about 20% of the companies that is for sale will actually sell. At this moment, a lot of SMEs, the smaller companies, just closed down. There was an article in the news this week where it said that, well, people don't think about selling. Entrepreneurs just close down business, which is, well, just a waste of a lot of value. And we together, we started thinking about how can we improve this process. We both have a technical and digital background. So how can we improve the process of selling? Sebastian and I got to know each other a couple of years ago. And
Yeah.
in fact, actually, Sebastian was our landlord at Marketing Guys. So we rented the office space from him, and that's how we got to know each other. I would pay the rent monthly to him. Well, that's how we got to know each other, and how we, in the end, started Best Bonobos as a result of that. In the
Cool.
years further.
That's indeed a very interesting story, because I think that indeed, as you guys say, the perspective of selling a company is perhaps not how you start your own business, probably, especially here in Europe, right? That's also, I guess, your perspective, guys. What I'm curious to know, like, obviously in this episode, I would like to know all the ins and outs on how you can get ready to it. Also, what kind of people say are more likely to sell their company. But before we start, like, is there typically one kind of company that you think could be very successful in thinking of an exit, but actually typically never considers that? Like, is there something like an underserved niche?
I think every company has a potential to sell for a good profit.
Okay.
pretty much every company is possible to sell.
Now, I was asking that because, for example, well, I was in the startup business before, and there typically you start with the idea of selling already. Where
Hmm.
I can imagine that probably a lot of small pop and mom shop don't really think of like selling their company. So, are there markets that actually
Yeah.
think more of this
Well,
perspective?
I think from experience, I can say, for example, smaller retail shops, like the
Smaller,
shops. From a personal story, I can share. A friend of mine had an uncle owning 4 flower shops, florists. So they would sell like the tulips and all the kinds of stuff. Uncle never thought about selling, built the company, had 4 branches in a local area, in the Nijmegen area, and he had 4 shops and didn't think about selling, maybe because he's not in the network of selling. It's
Mhm.
just he's just selling his flowers every day, making people happy with the flowers, but he wasn't thinking about himself necessarily. So he in the end shut down shop when he was 67 because he
Right.
didn't think about succession. He didn't think about people that wanted to buy the store. And to be honest, it will take you a couple of years to
Yes.
make your company sellable. It's not a thing you sell overnight. So selling your company takes time in preparation.
Yeah, it should
And
be part of the process.
it's a part of the process. And if you prepare well, you'll get well, first of all, you'll be able to sell, but you get a better price as well.
That's
Okay,
what
so I think you guys made it very clearly that actually selling is something that everyone can really consider.
is.
But you said it's also a process. It's a process for which you should get ready. It's not something that happens overnight. I think this is really the great bridge to like, okay, so how do you then get ready to sell? You said it's usually a 2 years process, so I can imagine it's quite long. A lot of needs to happen. But where would you say someone has to start if they want to think of selling their company?
Well, you first have to start on the inside, have clean and transparent financial records. Most entrepreneurs focus on selling their product. They're passionate about their products, but they don't look inside. So that's a good point to start. Get your IP ready. All your legal and compliance contracts should be okay. Stuff like that. HR is a big one, of course.
Can I ask you a follow-up question, Sebastian? So when you say ready and okay, what do you exactly mean by that?
Well, my personal experience is I was focusing on selling my product as well. HR was not
That's
my
very
strong suit.
recognizable. Yeah.
So a lot of contracts expired, but the
Okay.
supplier still supplied. But there was no contract, so they could end supplying anytime. We did an audit and we failed, but the business was growing. We were making a good profit, but we did fail the audit. So that's an important one.
And it's important to look at this from the buyer side, because the buyer is looking to invest in something that they want to make a profit on at a lowest risk possible. So if the risk is high, so say in Sebastian's example, contracts are expiring and you have long lasting relationships, but the contracts are not in place. I have a personal friend of mine who owns a design business. He has worked for a huge community in the Netherlands, or actually a city, a huge city, one of the 4 cities. And he has a 4-year contract to this. And he was telling me, like, I'm thinking about selling my company. And my first question to him was, well, what about the contract with that huge city? He said, well, that expires end of this year. Well, from a buyer's perspective, that's of course a huge risk,
It's not
because
worth
you've
anything.
worked for them for 4 years. The next 4 years are not certain at all, because they'll do a new request for proposal or a new tender as it's government owned, the city contract. The other thing I think that is very important is your processes. So have your processes in place. So apart from your financial transparency, you need to have your process and automation in place. So automate as much as possible and make sure you're not wasting any money, time, and margin on inefficient processes.
True, absolutely.
For me, the most important thing about selling an SME company, because we're talking mainly about SMEs, so companies with a value up to 10 million or something, 10 million euros or $12 million, around that age, that's ballpark. The main thing there is make your business run without you as the owner. Still, a lot of SMEs are built around the owner. The owner will have the main relationships with the biggest customers. They will be the number one salesperson. They are the HR responsible. They know everything about finance, and nobody else in the company does know anything about the finance. So they built a company which is dependable on the owner. So the first thing you need to do is make sure the company runs without you as the owner.
That's absolutely recognizable, what you just said. Well, if I think of myself, for example, well, I
Yeah.
certainly wouldn't be able to sell tomorrow. But, and I think that extracting yourself out of the operation is always like a big recurring topics, right? For entrepreneurs in general. It also allows you to be more scalable. Is there anything that you have seen that works well when it comes to extracting yourself out of operation? And one thing that also made me curious, like you often hear a lot of entrepreneurs, perhaps more in the service business, that say, well, you are central when it comes to sales. Do you also see it like that?
Yeah. So absolutely. So probably Sebastian will elaborate on it, but the thing that helps most or has helped me most is make sure you have a good management team in place.
Yeah, a strong management team.
Which sounds like a waterhead when you're small. Like you need to have those expensive people running your company and have someone responsible for finance, have someone responsible for the commercials, operations. So make sure you have all these people in your management team. The question I ask to entrepreneurs is, what happens when you have a 4-week holiday? Can you turn off your laptop, your cell phone, and will your company still run? The moment you say yes, you have a sellable company.
Yeah.
Yeah. So can you
the ultimate test to see if you can sell?
then you can think about selling, but you have to think about the management team, have that in place. I think that's the number one, to make yourself unnecessary in the company.
Absolutely.
Sebastian, you also want to add your perspective to this?
Well, it's a personal one as well. I was running the business. Everything was dependable on me. Financial things. I owned the credit card that did everything. I canceled my credit card and, well, access to some software fell through, for example. Little things like that. Everything depended on me. I hired a new CEO. He started introducing himself, slowly taking over stuff. But people still came to me with questions. And every time I had to tell people, well, please go to the new CEO. He's the responsible one. He has a vision, and I don't want to stand in his way. But I was still at the office every day. So people still came to my desk every day with the same questions every day. So at one time, the CEO came to me. He said, "You're horribly walking into in my way. So please leave. Just go away. Make yourself scarce." And that's what we did. So I just said goodbye. I left the office and I haven't returned other than for a cup of coffee or a social talk. And that improved a lot.
I can also imagine it gives very mixed feelings, right?
Yes, it does give mixed feelings. And well, that's a nice bridge to the next one. You have to be emotionally ready as well to sell because it's your child, the company.
Is there anything that you can recommend when it comes to managing your emotions in the process?
I think I have to turn to Elias for that one.
Yeah.
Because I'm pretty rational, luckily, so I can just cut the ties and go on.
Well, the thing is, people, you can turn to me, Sebastian, but basically you should turn to my wife, because she has seen me during the period of selling the company.
Yeah.
As an entrepreneur, you're always in control of your things. You are looking ahead, planning for years. Typically, you're long-term focused. You think about what the next steps could be. You think about what your next downside will be, how to prepare for that, everything. So entrepreneurs typically are in control. When you're selling your company, you're not always in control anymore, especially if you're in the negotiations. So the negotiation phase for me was the most stressful one, because I wasn't in control. Typically, if you sell your product to a company, you think about what's the objective of the talk going to be? What are they going to come with? How am I going to counter any problems that they're going to come up with? And you always have an answer. Over here, when you are in the negotiations phase of selling your company, they are looking into your bookkeeping, for example. They are looking into the people that you have into your staff. They're looking into your contracts, everything. So they're investigating everything. They already made out a bit. So they're going to say, hey, we're going to pay this amount for your company, but we want to do a due diligence, etc. And we need to do the paperwork. Mind you, that paperwork typically takes month. So between saying that they're going to buy your company and the actual signature typically is 4-5 months. Within that 4-5 months, you didn't tell anyone in your company that you were selling, except for your management team maybe, but you didn't tell your customers, you didn't tell your personnel, you didn't tell anyone. Those are very important in this stage, because if your key clients or key employee leaves, that's going to impact the value. So if so you don't have that in control. So for me, that was emotionally pretty stressful to know that you're going to sell, but there is a lot of dependencies that you don't have control on. So I was at a point, I told my wife on a Friday night, I think we're not going to do this. We're just keeping the company. I can't handle this anymore. In the end, she said, well, just wait for a couple of more weeks and we'll see. But for me, it was a stressful period, mainly because you're not in control. And control is the number one thing a lot of entrepreneurs do have, because they own the company. They know everything about it. They want to have processes in control, client conversations in control. They know about everything about their employees, etc. But this one, you don't have in control.
Got it. Now that's very recognizable. And also, like, just to be clear, we're still talking about the preparation phase, right? Actually, the selling is perhaps just the cherry on top of a pie. There's a lot of things that happen after that, but all the things that you're describing are things that happen after. So you guys with Best Bonobos obviously offer consultancy with that as well. Is this also still a part where, say, you recommend finding the help of an expert, or is it something that entrepreneurs should try to do themselves before getting in touch?
Well, it's a dual answer. Yes, you have to have some experts help you. But the thing is, when we were selling our companies, we were looking into expertise to hire, and they're all pretty expensive.
Well, about
too expensive.
Between 5 and 15% of your sale price. So the thing is, yes, you need help, and we'll come to that later. But typically, even if you ask ChatGPT, I want to sell my company, what's my first step? The ChatGPT will say, well, typically you'll go to an M&A firm, and this M&A firm is going to help you. The thing is, I talked to 3 M&A firms. They pitched everything to me. And to me, it felt like they were taking a piece of the pie, a huge piece of the pie, for which I worked 15 years. I worked my ass off for 15 years, and they're just going to take 10-15% of this just for being a broker, because that's what they are. So instead of hiring an M&A firm, we thought we would be able to automate a lot of that, and that's helpful. But you could still use help, but from experts like an accountant or a tax specialist or a fiscal specialist or whatsoever. Those are very, very helpful, especially in, for example, bringing your accountancy to order, or maybe someone that helps you on a commercial field that, for example, helps you to increase the value of your customer base. So someone that helps you to find recurring customers. Helps you
like a low touch approach to things where you don't necessarily need, a very big structure, which is perhaps built for larger purchases, but rather to fit the size of SMEs actually.
Yeah, you don't need the broker to find you a legal advisor, because you can find them yourself.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, the thing is, for me, I was sitting there, and I had a life-changing event, and that made me want to sell my company and start something from the beginning, because that's the thing I like most. I was talking to those M&A firms, and I was just asking them, why would I hire you? Because in my opinion, the number one thing would be for them to find a potential buyer, right? You think, hey, they are an M&A firm. They probably have a list of potential buyers for me. So if I turn to them, it's going to be easy to sell. Well, that turned out not to be true, because all 3 of them answered to me is like, why would I hire you? They said, well, mainly to do negotiations, because it's hard to negotiate about your own business. Well, I don't agree with that. I didn't agree with that, and I still don't, because as an entrepreneur, you're used to negotiating, and that's the number one thing I like most. But that wouldn't be a reason for me to hire them. So,
especially not for 10% of.
No, it would be really like hundreds of thousands of dollars or euros that you pay them. And if you calculate that back to an hourly fee, they're earning like 500 to 1,000 an hour for the work they're doing. And I typically, when I explain this to friends, what I'm doing now with Sebastian, I said, well, when you're selling your house, you can use a traditional real estate agent, right? He's coming in, he's going to talk to you, and he's going to ask for a 1.5% in the Netherlands to sell your company. He's going to write the text for you. He's going to make a brochure. He's going to put you online and everything. The other way to sell your house would be to do this on an automated service like in the Netherlands, Makelaarslag, which is an online service in which you put your own photographs, builds the text for you. And this is what we do with Best Bonobos. So we're automating the entire process of selling your company, all the steps.
And when we started that idea, we started with the real selling process. But we've been talking about how to get your company ready to sell. We found out that to sell your company, the most value we can add to entrepreneurs is to help them in the process to get their company ready. The selling process is just automation. That's easy.
Yeah.
So we've built that. That's not the issue. But the main value we can add is help them get ready first and get the most value out of their company.
You guys said something very interesting, which I think it's in general a very huge topic, right? Which is like who does the outreach and where the value really lies. Obviously, with Best Bonobos, the idea that you are offering is to kind of try to make that as little ad hoc as possible so that you have immediate access to a pool. But obviously in abstract, there is also more like, there's a lot of different ways to do it. There's also the more traditional approach where you do the outreach yourself. Can you give us a bit of like a spectrum of what are all the possible options available? So we talked about the pool. How did it work for you when you were trying to sell your company? And who does the outreach?
So I'll answer it first, and then you can elaborate. So for me, first, when you start selling a company, you think about your value, right? So what's the value of your company? There's a lot of factors that will affect the value. Then you build a brochure, like a one page here on which you have every detail, and then you build a long list. So for me, it helped to find a long list of people that potentially would be interested in buying the company. So that would be competitors.
And it could be anyone.
Could be anyone. So anyone that is looking to invest into companies. It could be some other competitor. It could be a family member. It could be someone you know from your network that wants to invest in companies. It could be
Your management team.
your management team. So in the end, I started talking about this to my network on a one-on-one basis based on a long list and my management team. So together we found someone that as an external investor bought the majority share of the company, and the management team bought the minority share. So they did a management buy-in, which by the way is an excellent trust factor for an external investor, because if a management team is willing to invest in a company, an external investor will say, "Hey, this is the pot of gold,"
Ultimate validation.
because they show that they are trustful. They show that they have confidence in the company. They invest their own money in it. So I'm willing to invest in the majority of this. So I talked to a couple of them. And to be honest, I talked to these external M&A firms first about valuation, and there's a lot of fluff about valuation.
Mm-hmm.
There's a lot of blah blah and a lot of very difficult ways to determine this, but in the end, it's not that hard to value a company. So I knew the value that I wanted to get, and then it's just negotiations. To be honest, it took me two rounds of talking, 2 hours or 1.5 hour sessions to discuss this, and we were finished. So it took me 3 hours of negotiations, and that's it.
Yeah, I guess often these things are a bit like, sometimes they go just very fast, probably even faster than you imagine, right? And it feels like after 2 years that you get ready, you probably would want something a bit longer, and you're like, oh, is it all that?
Yeah, and you want to pick the momentum, right? So at the moment of this recording is August. So if I would want to sell this was actually the period of time that I was thinking about selling. You would want to sell at the end of a year, because you have your year ready financially, you'll have your profits. very visible. You don't want to have that uncertainty of how is this year gonna turn out. So Sebastian.
Well, the process is pretty similar. I sold like 25% of my company to an investor. They did an offer I thought was pretty low, but if we look at it afterwards, and they did some smart things to increase the value for me. So it was a pretty good offer, but it took me a few weeks to recognize that it was a good offer. So that's the other side of the story.
Yeah, sure. Yeah.
So it can go any way.
Yeah.
Well, I think you guys share so far very interesting stories and very interesting insights from your part. And hopefully also interesting tips for the audience. One thing that I would like to ask you before we wrap this up is actually, I can imagine that when people get in contact with you, they must have all sort of questions. Like, is there like one or two that are most recurring that we can perhaps address now, so that hopefully we do some like information service for the ones who are listening?
I think an important one is have your story complete. Write down your dream.
Wait a second, Sebastian, because I ask you not what advice do you give, but what question do you hear more often?
The number one question is, I think we already elaborated more on this, is but how can I get my company ready, or how can I get for sale, and how do I make it independent on myself?
This is really what you hear more often.
The other thing what I hear is, as an entrepreneur, you meet a lot of entrepreneurs, you speak to a lot of entrepreneurs. The number one thing I get asked is, I want to sell. How do I do this? Because
where do I start?
Where do I start? So they really don't know where to begin because they're just busy selling their stuff. I have two stories. A friend that has a huge kitchen store, and he knows he wants to sell. And I was sitting with him on a barbecue, and he said, "Yeah, you sold that company. I like what you did. I want to do the same. How do I do this?" He sells millions of kitchens, or 4 millions, like hundreds of kitchens.
And I guess that latches on to what Sebastian just said. So the answer to that is really like, get your story ready, right?
Story ready. First, think about how does this process work? Because it's not as hard as you think, but you need to be ready.
Because would you then say that like selling your company is also really like a branding thing?
Yes.
Yeah. It's a branding thing and a process thing. You have to have both.
What's important of getting your marketing and branding ready when you're trying to sell, your communication ready?
Well, I think you need to have a transparent story, but I can share some insights on what I did for when I sold my company. So in the process of selling, we knew we were selling. I decided to do a nationwide radio campaign. So we were on national radio, Radio 1 in the Netherlands, which is a huge campaign, cost me about 20K. But from the buyer who I was talking to, I heard, wow, yeah, this must be a great brand because you're on radio. So you're a national, and he hears from his network that he is talking to, yeah, I heard about those guys. They're on radio. So yes, we had a strong brand, but we intensified this by doing a radio campaign. Did it bring a lot of leads or a lot of business? Okay, we earned it back. I think we had a couple of good deals from it. But the other perspective was the selling of the company and making sure you are being seen as a leader in your market. So if you can do anything, let's say to pump up your marketing during that campaign, during that period, I think that would be highly advisable.
So in your case, the rebranding that you did in the light of selling was really not just a way to get new leads, but really a way to communicate trust and a signal of quality in the ear of people who were receiving your campaign.
Yeah. And of course, in that process, you need to think about your profitability, because in the end, your value is highly determined by your profitability. I was in the services space, so that needs to be kept in mind. But it only cost me 20K, and it brought me, it at least accelerated the sale of the company.
That's a very interesting story. Thanks a lot for sharing it with us.
Welcome.
Well, guys, what's the best way in which people can hear more about you and stay in contact?
So as said, we are building the software as of this moment. We expect to launch it somewhere in September, October timeframe. Should people want to join the software, we have a beta group on bestbonobos.com. You can sign up for the beta, which will be free of charge for the first 6 months. So if you want to start using the software, want to test it out, etc., we'll offer a free beta to a limited group of users.
Cool. That's very good. Obviously, the link to it will be in the show notes as well.
Nice.
Well, Elias and Sebastian, I want to thank you a lot for your time. It has been brilliant to have you here. Thanks a lot.
Thank you.
Thank you too.